Hello, I'm Catherine Nicholson. This is Talking Europe on France 24. Now, we are just over a fortnight in to the new arrangements between the United Kingdom and the European Union. Their combined 500 million citizens getting used to things to varying degrees. Now, we've seen some major European freight handlers refusing to take goods to the UK until further notice. There are some shoppers in various countries unable to find certain foodstuffs, some of this due to COVID restrictions, some of it due to new Brexit rules. And there have been Brits unable to reach their second homes in various parts of the EU, even a British lorry driver who became internet famous when he had his ham sandwiches confiscated in the Netherlands under new customs regulations. So how much is this all teething problems? How much is this just what Europeans have to get used to? And how much of it is down to the coronavirus? I'm very pleased to welcome to the show the Westminster government's man in Paris, so to speak, Lord Ed Llewellyn, British Ambassador to France and Monaco. Thank you very much for being with us.
Very good to be here. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to you too. Now, I just want to start off with the coronavirus situation, which for people here in France or in the UK wanting to go to France is causing problems, of course, restrictions on movement. A lot of people wanting to know, is it impossible to travel between the UK and France at the moment, or what conditions do they have to meet?
Well, both governments are discouraging all but essential travel. Obviously, travel and movement risks spreading the virus, and both the British and French governments are doing everything to avoid that, as other governments are in Europe. So only essential travel. With respect to travel to the UK, we've had in place since the summer a requirement to self-isolate once you arrive in the UK. And from Monday, it will be necessary to have a negative test.
I think people want to know as well when this situation might be eased. Do we have an idea of a threshold, for example, of when infection rates in each country get down to a certain level? Do you know, is there a sort of a trigger point for the easing of these restrictions?
I can't speak for the French government, but both governments keep these measures under review, and as you will have seen, tailor them to the developing situation on the virus. In both our cases, I mean, the arrival of the vaccines is extremely good news, and I think points to hope for the way forward. In the UK, as you know, we are deploying the AstraZeneca Oxford vaccine as well as the Pfizer vaccine, and as of this morning, 3 million people have already been vaccinated in the United Kingdom. It's a formidable operation. It's on course to reach 15 million vaccinations by mid-February. It's an enormous operation across the UK, 1,000 vaccination centres, 7 giant vaccination centres, 200 pharmacies that are now vaccinating, and you will have seen the coverage in the last few days.
The British government has been very keen to flag all of this up recently, and it's done tremendously well on vaccinations compared to other countries. Do you think perhaps, though, there's a sense that many voices say the UK could have done more earlier, could have put in quarantining, enforced it better, tests on arrival, that sort of thing? Is the UK government trying to play catch up a little bit at the moment?
Look, I think all governments, certainly the French government and the British government, are facing very difficult situations together. The number of infections remains high. This is an extremely a difficult situation every government is dealing with. I would just say, with respect to the vaccine, we're very proud and pleased in the UK that the Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine is being rolled out. That is a product of amazing international cooperation, not just the fantastic scientists at Oxford University, but working with AstraZeneca, a big international British-Swedish company, headed up, as it happens by a French CEO. And that's a vaccine that's not just for the UK. It's going to be of enormous benefit to the world, because, as you know, as many viewers will know, it can be transported relatively easily. It can be stocked in a normal fridge. It's cheaper than some of the other vaccines. So I think that's a huge benefit to humanity.
I'd like to talk about issues crossing the border, just relating to trade rather than citizens, which we've been talking about. And this is much more to do with the Brexit deal. Now, that deal announced on Christmas Eve came into force on January the 1st. And we have seen the reality of non-tariff barriers for businesses in the EU and in the UK since then. There's been a lot more paperwork. And several businesses are saying, they're really having trouble and they might go to the wall on this. I'm thinking particularly of fishing companies in Scotland, especially wanting to export fresh seafood to European markets. I spoke to someone at the British International Freight Association who told me he believes things are only going to get worse as the trade volumes increase over the next few weeks. Why has it come to this, and what's being done to fix it?
Well, first of all, I understand obviously the frustrations of the fishing communities and the fishermen and women, particularly in Scotland, who are encountering these frustrating difficulties. I think what we're seeing here is, the new procedures that have come into place, getting used to those procedures, understanding them, putting them in place on both sides. So they are issues that we have to tackle and that are being tackled one by one as they come up. There's an enormous amount of work being done between the Environment Department in the UK and their colleagues in Scotland, for example, with Food Standards Scotland. But these are individual difficulties that need to be worked through as they come up. But I want to reassure your viewers that the urgency and the importance of it is extremely well understood.
Well, I know that you liaise with the business community here, people exporting and importing across that border there. The British government, we know, did warn business. There were advertising campaigns to prepare for new arrangements since the middle of last year. However, the advice itself only started being published in July. And you and I and the businesses involved know that there are still gaps in that advice. People in the industry have told me that. I'm sure they've told you that as well. The UK government did have the power to extend the Brexit transition period, even when they saw that the negotiations were running quite slowly, but they chose not to. As somebody who's dealing with the sticky end of this, do you feel that was a mistake not to extend?
No, I don't, because the government was clear about that throughout. And when I came on your programme, I think already a couple of years ago now, at that time, a lot of the line of questioning was understandably, about the lack of certainty affecting business for the future. Now, we have clarity with this agreement in place. It's an agreement that, and I pay tribute to the negotiators on both sides. It's an agreement that frames the future cooperation and the future relationship between Britain and the European Union, not just for the next few weeks, but for years to come. And having that framework in place, I think now provides a very good basis for moving forward. At its heart, as you know, is quota tariffing and quota-free access. That's very important and a first for one of these trade agreements. It's a very important agreement, but of course it brings changes with it, and those changes are being worked through now. I was in Calais on the 1st of January. Admittedly, at that moment, freight flows were low, and they're picking up now. But as we encounter these difficulties, I think there's great willingness and urgency to resolve them on both sides.
But would you agree that the context of the pandemic added on to Brexit is exacerbating issues on both sides?
I think that, as I said earlier, both governments, and not just the British and French governments, but governments everywhere are dealing with this terrible pandemic and everything that involves. But the key point with respect to our exit from the EU is that we do have this agreement in place, and I think that provides a good way forward, while accepting that it does bring practical changes, paperwork changes with it, which everybody we'll need to adapt to and get used to, and that will take a little bit of time.
One area where there's less of an agreement, if I can say, less cooperation written into the deal, is on security, which I'm sure is something you're involved with closely as well as Ambassador. The UK no longer has real-time access to EU police and security databases and vice versa. Do you regret that that wasn't included in the deal? Because it will make it slower for police on both sides to investigate crimes committed against their citizens.
Look, step back a bit on this. I mean, first of all, the agreement does include part on, and a very important part on security, which will make possible our continued security cooperation in many areas. For example, in passenger name records, a very important aspect to name just one. I would also point out that a lot of the cooperation between us is done at a bilateral, between government level. So, for example, between Britain and France, which is the area with which I'm most familiar, our cooperation is intense and 24/7, frankly. Our intelligence agencies and security forces work night and day to protect our peoples, and they'll carry on doing that after our exit from the EU, just as they did before.
Ambassador Ed Llewellyn, I'd like to thank you very much for your time. Thanks for speaking to us.
Thank you.
And thanks to you, our viewers, for tuning in. Hope to see you for part 2 of the programme in a couple of minutes' time.